Today I will be talking about the drug use in Euphoria. What the show does well is it humanizes its characters, depicts drug use in various ways, such as recreationally, experimentally, with regards to addiction, and prescribes medication. And it also represents other addictions, including emotional addiction, sex addiction, and binge eating disorder, which is implied. Rue's the main character, and we learn right off the bat in the pilot that she struggles with addiction and has been diagnosed with OCD, ADHD, and anxiety from an early age. She's also been previously hospitalized after an overdose. Rue's also falling in love. She's standing up to someone who's bullying her friends, Nate, and she's sarcastic, funny, and loyal. Depictions of addiction in film and TV have historically been one-dimensional. The characters who are struggling with addiction are often given no character development. They are only shown with relationship to a drug and are portrayed as erratic, dangerous, irredeemable, or morally bereft. This is usually used as a plot device. When our only exposure to addiction is through these one-sided, reductive portrayals, it shapes our perception of people who struggle with addiction. It also shapes our perception of drugs if we aren't given any other education on the matter. In season 1, we see Rue trying to be sober so she can have a successful relationship. While she's clearly struggling, we also see her having fun, being a supportive friend, falling in love, and investigating the social happenings. Her addiction doesn't define her, and there's far more to her story. We can see several sets, her mindset, and settings, places, and people she does drugs with. We also see people who don't struggle with addiction doing the same drugs as she is, without the same results. In this scene, we saw her and Jules doing a drug together, and it seems to be a pretty positive bonding experience for them. In this scene, the characters Cassie and Maddie are doing Molly together, and similarly, they have a pretty good experience. Throughout the show, Fezco smokes weed, and it doesn't seem to be a problem for him. He does it recreationally, and that's kind of the end of the story. Nate drinks, as do most of the other characters, and we see that throughout the show. But again, it's not a defining characteristic of Nate or anybody else. And then finally, we see Rue giving her father medication, which she ends up taking that's not prescribed to her, but this is another representation of drug use that we see in the show. This is important because 70% of drug users do not have an addiction. The show demonstrates drug use as a recreational, non-disruptive activity while also showing the struggle of one character with addiction. This separates the issue from the drugs so we can focus on the circumstances that have led to Rue's addiction. As we learn in the beginning of the show, Rue was diagnosed with OCD, ADHD, and anxiety from an early age. As a neurodivergent child, she experiences overstimulation, social anxiety, and chronic exhaustion. This experience is compounded by the traumatic loss of her father during her teen years. She doesn't have the tools to comprehend this loss and finds relief in substances. These are some quotes from Carl Hart that I think really support the way that the show portrays drug use. Regarding the relatively small percentage of individuals who become addicted, co-occurring psychiatric disorders and socioeconomic factors account for a substantial portion of these addictions. The notion that drug addiction is a brain disease is catchy but empty. There's virtually no data in humans indicating that addiction is a disease of the brain. The show also represents other addictions. We see characters who grapple with emotional addictions and relationships, sex and porn addictions, and eating disorders. By displaying these various kinds of addictions and coping mechanisms in the same show, we're able to challenge the stigma placed specifically on substance abuse and people who struggle with substance addiction. Addiction is not a disease, and it's not a personality flaw. We see teenagers in this show, and several characters make mistakes. We also learn their backstories, each of which helps us to contextualize the way they act in the present day. Rue is not the antagonist. Her struggle with addiction is not used to paint her as less than the other characters, because she isn't. Here are some quotes given by one of the showrunners of Euphoria that I think really sum up the intent of the show with regard to its depiction of drug use. So many things about our culture are rooted in trauma and the ways that we have had to protect ourselves and protect each other. Euphoria does not glorify drug use, but it also doesn't demonize drug use or drug users, and that is what makes people feel so uncomfortable.